Welcome to NP Certification Q&A, presented by Fitzgerald Health Education Associates. This podcast is for NP students studying to pass their NP certification exam. Getting to the correct test answers means breaking down the exam questions themselves. Expert Fitzgerald faculty clinicians share their knowledge and experience to help you dissect the anatomy of a test question so you can better understand how to arrive at the correct test answer. So, if you're ready, let's jump right in.
A 32-year-old female patient tells the psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner in the course of an office visit that her toddler's pediatrician has suggested that the 3-year-old be referred for further assessment because his MCHAT R score was high. Your patient is upset and does not think that the result was correct. Which of the following findings in the child would support an elevated MCHAT score? So granted, the question is a bit oddly structured, but you know what? Sometimes that happens on your boards too. And so while knowing your information is the most important thing, knowing how to evaluate a question is a strong number two. And always, and you've probably heard me say this before, it is always most important to read the entire question, read all the answer choices, and then answer what is asked of you. So while it starts out with a 32-year-old female patient, and you might be thinking, oh, this is going to be a question about somebody who's 32, the actual question for you really is, what would support an elevated MCHAT R score, which, of course, analysis and application, implicit is that you know what the MCHAT R measures. That really, you need to know what the MCHAT R is a screening tool for, and then be able to apply that, which findings would support that. So let's look at this again. A 32-year-old female patient tells the psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner in the course of an office visit that her toddler's pediatrician has suggested the 3-year-old be referred for further assessment because his MCHAT R score was high. Your patient is upset. She doesn't think that result was correct. Which of the following findings in the child would support an elevated MCHAT score? Well, if you know, then great. If you don't know, read the answer choices and see if it makes anything a little bit more clear for you. A says the child is mostly nonverbal and uses gestures to communicate. B, the child's growth is not maintaining a consistent pattern. C, the child is atypically mean to the family cat and has tried to hurt it. Or D, the child is still not potty trained. So if you don't know what the MCHAT R is, I don't know that any of that will help you or not. So it's a good thing that we are here doing this review. Which of the following findings in the child would support an elevated MCHAT R score? And the answer is A. A is the correct answer. The MCHAT R is an assessment screening tool, and a high score is consistent with the presence of autism spectrum disorder, and the child should be evaluated by a specialty provider. MCHAT R is a screening tool. It's a 20-item screening tool that is a screen for autism spectrum disorder. Remember, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that kids be screened a minimum of 3 times in early childhood, at 18 months, at 24 months, and then again at 30 months, specifically screened for autism spectrum disorder. Now, granted, you probably aren't doing that. This is something that's typically initiated in the primary care setting, but if you work in a mental health setting where you see children, it is not unusual to get the referral, oh, MCHAT R score was X. I think anything over 8, it's a 20-item tool, and I think anything over 8, obviously you want no points, and the fewer the points, the better, but any points above 8, I believe is considered a high score and requires further assessment. And so, if we recognize that it is a screening tool for autism spectrum disorder, then it probably makes the correct answer a little bit more apparent. The child is mostly nonverbal and uses gestures to communicate. By the age of 3, the child should be very verbal, and indeed, you should be able to understand most of what it's saying. Anyone not in daily contact with the child should be able to understand most of what a 3-year-old says. So the child who is mostly nonverbal, that is a concern and needs to be further evaluated. Again, it's a screening tool. It doesn't mean that there is absolutely a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. It's a screening tool that requires further evaluation. Now, the child's growth not maintaining a consistent pattern, that's just a physical growth and development issue, and it has nothing to do with the MCHAT R. The child is atypically mean to the family cat and has tried to hurt it. That is a cause for concern, but it's not one of the MCHAT R phenomenon. We don't really expect mean to animals and trying to hurt animals as an indication of autism spectrum disorder. There's a different concern there, and it does need to be evaluated. And the child still not being potty trained at the age of 3, while it might be a hair frustrating for the parents, it's really not considered abnormal. Some kids are not fully potty trained until they reach the age of 4 or closer to 4. And so, to summarize, A is the correct answer. The MCHAT R is an assessment screening tool, and a high score is consistent with the presence of autism spectrum disorder. The child should be evaluated by a specialty provider, by an autism center. Relying largely on nonverbal communication at the age of 3, it is consistent with ASD. It is not necessarily assured, but it's consistent. Conversely, while a growth pattern not consistent with the birth trajectory requires further evaluation, it's not consistent with ASD. It's not something that would be flagged by an MCHAT R. Similarly, like I said, aggressive or hurtful behavior to pets is a concern, but not consistent with ASD. And finally, as I said, not being potty trained by the age of 3, while it may be a bit concerning for the parents, really isn't atypical. 3 is the upper limit of normal. Some children are potty trained before, and some are a little bit after.
Thank you for listening to NP Certification Q&A, presented by Fitzgerald Health Education Associates. Please rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. And for more NP resources, visit FHEA.com.